Hello and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from Dungeons & Dragons, all while giving a small but quickly digestible history about them. Together we'll go over their history within the game, how they're utilized in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. This week we'll be shifting over to the Succubus/Incubus, the charming demonic fiends who are single-handedly believed to be responsible for the existence of most tieflings in the known world. We'll be covering their base lore, providing some different ways for you to stick them in your games, as well as some more hands-on advice such as running combat encounters with them and what sorts of loot or magic items they would have in their possession with which to reward your players. For the purposes of this video, I will be alternating between referring to them as Incubus and Succubus, but I do largely mean the same thing until later on in this video, where I provide a bit more of a nuanced look at their differences beyond surface level. With that said, let's get started. Appearance-wise, Succubi and Incubi are depicted as largely humanoid-looking, save for horns, claws, sharp teeth, slitted eyes, and large bat wings that granted them flight. Their skin color ranging the entire gamut of demonic hues, from classic red to lavender, green, and so on. Succubi and Incubi were also described to be flawless and excessively beautiful, but I put forth the idea that a Succubi would benefit from the power of taking on the form that their viewer finds the most appealing naturally, rather than just what looks aesthetically pleasing to the general public. As such, as a small thing at my tables, a Succubus and Incubus could look entirely different to each person that is perceiving them, but it will always be a form that attracts the person and makes them more vulnerable to the demon's charm and machinations. Speaking of charming, Succubi were known for their ability to sway mortals to their will by the use of physical touch. The more intimate the connection, the stronger the Incubi's hold was on you. So things like a kiss on the cheek or lips could grant a momentary bit of control, whereas an embrace or actual copulation, especially if you have a bard in the party, could leave the victim entirely enslaved to the Succubus with no hope of breaking free. The physical contact was also how the Succubus would feed, draining soul energy and life force from their victim with each encounter until eventually the victim was left a lovesick husk. You would think that because of this, an Incubus's kiss would be utterly pleasurable, but it is stated to be more akin to a drug, with a passing empty high that devolves into an almost addictive need. You can use this to play with your PCs on a psychological level, having them become obsessed with finding the demon if only to indulge their inner wants. In fact, in earlier editions of the game, when a Succubus slew a victim through the use of their draining powers, they could rise back up as a vampire, which I think is super dope and should actually have not been taken away from the current version of the game. Because that in and of itself is a very interesting fail state for your PCs should they fall into the throes of one of these fiends. They could also just die, but becoming a lovesick vampire sounds a lot more fun and could allow them to be potentially cured of the affliction through further adventuring. A player would have to give their PC up to the DM for a little while, play a new PC, and then as the party works to try and cure their old friend, goes to confront the Succubus and then break their friend free of her control. Succubi and Incubi were also capable of changing their physical form at will, usually keeping to the shape of humanoids and using this power to disguise themselves, hide from nosy parties, as well as camouflage while infesting into high society or certain social circles. They also possess telepathy and the classic demonic powers such as the manipulation of and immunity to fire, soul sight, and vulnerability to cold iron materials. In terms of Succubus behavior, like all fiends, these demons were wholly focused on the acquisition and devouring of souls. As such, Incubi and Succubi were driven to hunt prey that were explicitly passionate, creative, or teeming with vigor and life. This could range from glory-drunk athletes to master artists in the midst of creating their masterwork, as the passion that these targets held within them would fuel the Succubus more than just the average peasant or noble or anyone else. For them, the strength of the personality and the charisma was akin to eating the finest and most nutritious of foods, and so they would often be found in places that fostered these sorts of people, such as urban areas, art universities, bard colleges, Olympic-style games, high society parties, or even operating within noble courts themselves. Due to their telepathy, Succubi could scout out and find out information about their targets in order to better approach them, feigning interest in their work or their hobbies, and knowing whether or not they needed to stroke the target's ego or if it was better to emulate the sensitivity of a kindred spirit. They would then use this for all it was worth, draining the target until they either passed, and possibly rose as a vampire under the demon's control, or until they found a better meal to chase, leaving the victim empty and obsessed with their lost lust. Now, when it comes to running Succubi and Incubi in combat, fighting these monsters is actually the least interesting part about them. The draw of a DM including a Succubus in their game is the intrigue and mystery of their manipulations, the psychological damage that they inflict on their victims, and the eventual discovery of their presence. Once that is all passed and initiative is rolled, the Succubi usually falls back to using its seductive and charming abilities to its maximum capability, dominating other party members and NPCs into protecting it while firing from the backline and using their wings to gain a height advantage. As such, I would equate a succubus to more of a controller or striker role when it comes to combat, preferring to use her charm to let others do the fighting for her while she escapes, or waits for one of the PCs to be knocked down before hitting them with a draining kiss for a killing blow. Incubi and succubi are not the kind of demon to fight to the death. They will flee at the first sign of trouble or a combat not going well, and must be stalked and caught in order to be able to confront them head on. Due to their telepathy, they are able to see into the minds and thoughts of those who are suspicious of them, and could also glean over a person's capabilities by studying them and sifting through their minds. Succubi naturally also want to have all of the angles and the highest advantages against their target, so upon scouting and ascertaining certain information about the party, they will begin preparations to directly counter their strengths and exploit their weaknesses. Big, strong, easily seduced mercenaries can serve as a meat shield for them, while a bard starved for a muse can make the PCs miss their attacks through their use of utility with bardic inspiration. All this is to say, the cool factor of an encounter with a succubus should be less focused on the succubus themselves and more on the NPCs that they choose to surround themselves with and throw back at the party. There's nothing like a fallen paladin smiting a PC in the face, or a fiend warlock bonded to the succubus doing everything that they can to defend their perceived lover and patron. I've included a succubus stat block that I personally like to use for my games, and linked it in the description below. Now, a warning. From this point on in the video, I will be talking about themes slightly related to the BDSM and kink culture, and if you are uncomfortable with these topics and simply wish to skip over them, you can click to this timestamp to proceed onto the Succubus NPC and encounters portion of this video. With that said, when I personally run succubi and incubi at the table, I've started to try and divorce the concept of the incubi and succubi from both the heteronormative and gender binary that they started with, especially now that modern society has begun discussing and deconstructing these social concepts. As such, I actually prefer to depict them without the gender binary assigned to them, but more so as a direct portrayal of their personality from the dominant/submissive perspective. An incubus could be male, female, or non-gendered, since they're literally demons from another world. But what makes them an incubus is their aspect of control, dominance, and physical presence. Incubi exude authority, they take control of situations, and are often the pursuers and pushers of the relationships that they are in. This is kind of the tall, abrasive gladiator keen to get as many lovers on his arms as they can carry, who decides to take on situations head-on, and prefers to exude control over the subjects that he is feeding on. Likewise, the succubi can also be of any physical shape, but they are much more receptive, absorbing the ideas and affections of their target, whilst mulling and subtly changing them to suit their needs and wants. A succubus doesn't necessarily want to be in a prominent position, preferring to let the world weave around them as they quietly take what they need to survive and thrive. This is the quiet yet beautiful piece of arm candy belonging to a powerful crime lord, or belonging to a noble who calls the shots, all while she quietly steers them in the directions that she wants with subtle whispers and very quiet, demure nudges. And then there's the concept of the concubus, which is a form of the fiend that has no predilection towards being dominant or submissive, and instead chooses to embody whatever it needs to in order to get what they want. They can be both dominant or subservient, and thus the versatility actually makes them one of the most dangerous fiends, able to fit into a wide variety of positions and situations. I got the idea for this from a Reddit thread that I've also included in the description below. Now, with everything that we've covered in mind, here are a couple of NPCs and an encounter that I like to use whenever I want to run succubi in my games, of which you guys can absolutely steal and use at your own tables. First, we have the Cunning Linguist. Yes, I did watch Austin Powers when I was a kid, who I usually depict as a succubus who works as a diplomat between the demons of the abyss and the mortals who wish to form a pact with said demons. As we all know, most demons in the abyss are monstrous, chaotic, and utterly terrifying compared to their more cunning and charismatic devil counterparts. So in order to foster better relations between them and their warlocks or summoners, a demon can commission a succubus to serve as their liaison in terms of negotiations. Due to their innate powers of persuasion and charm, succubi can extract better deals and more favorable circumstances for their demon patrons, leaving mortals in positions that, to the common PC, would seem extremely obvious to avoid. But it's hard to think logically when staring into the alluring eyes of a succubi, rather than the horrible two-headed visage of Demogorgon or the faceless form of Jubilex. You could take a number of different approaches with this one, such as having succubi take on the aspects of their demonic patron, such as a two-headed succubi for the Demogorgon, or dark gray skin and glowing tattoos for servants of Gratzt. There's certainly no end to your succubi customization. Next, we have an NPC called the Starved Artist, who is actually a victim of the succubus's powers rather than a succubus themselves. This is an artist who has been targeted, drained, and then left by the demon, and now their art has become solely focused on the love that they had lost, causing their once prolific career to begin to suffer. This can be a sculptor, a poet, a songwriter, or anything else, but the key is that the succubus has become the sole subject of the artist's work, causing people to see it as indulgent, repetitive, and mildly concerning given how explicit the work has become. It is now up to the party to find out why the artist has become obsessed, as well as maybe track down this fiend in order to find a way to break the curse. Maybe the artist has something that the party needs in order to progress a quest, and his obsession keeps them from trying to bring it up in order to extract it from him. Or your PCs could take the opposite route and maybe extract the information that they need from the succubus rather than going to the artist themselves. It provides a little bit more variety in terms of how your players want to approach the problem. And finally, we have my personal favorite, which is an encounter that I like to call the Cult of Personality. This encounter is best described as when a succubus seduces an entire group of people against the party that makes the encounter more difficult in some way, beyond just the concerns of challenge rating. Perhaps a succubus has infiltrated an art school by posing as a nude model, using their charm to take over many students clamoring to capture her on the page. When the party confronts her for the death of the professor via a draining kiss, she sicks the students on them in a vicious fervor, and now the party has to decide how to approach confronting the succubus without harming innocent student bystanders. This is just one example, but it could be applicable to many different forms depending on your setting and what kind of people the succubus has gathered around. Now, in terms of succubus components, due to the fact that most fiends vanish back to the abyss after being killed, it is very difficult to acquire anything from them without having to delve into the abyss itself. With that said, 3 key parts that could be used for creating magic items, scrolls, or potions would be the incubus's eyes, blood, and interestingly enough, their tails, which is great since I personally like to depict succubi with scorpion tails anyway. Succubi blood can be brewed into a filter of love or used as a powerful aphrodisiac. Their eyes can be made into powerful charming magic items or implements that utilize enchantment magic. And their tails can be constructed into weapons such as whips, flails, or even infernal chains capable of restricting powerful celestials. With that said, below are a couple of magic items that I think make sense for an incubi to either wield or have in their possession, or could be made out of the essences that the party collects after doing battle with them. And finally, for a homebrew magic item this evening, we have Muse. Muse is a +2 whip that requires attunement, and grants the wielder a +2 bonus to all attack and damage rolls made with the weapon. While attuned to this whip, the wielder gains expertise on all charisma-based skill checks, and once per encounter, upon making a successful attack against a target, the wielder can force that target to make a DC 15 charisma saving throw or be charmed as per the charm person's spell, lasting a number of rounds equal to the wielder's charisma modifier. Important to note that there is no automatic save for this at the end of the creature's turn, but if the creature is damaged or for instance slapped in the face as an action by another NPC, they can then make another saving throw to break the charm effect. I've included the item stat block in the description below, and with that, that's our coverage of incubi, succubi, and concubi, everybody. I want to thank all of you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and press the little bell icon to be notified of future videos. If you guys want to see the progression of pieces or a chance to vote on the next video, I like to post progress of my art as well as polls on the community tab. DMs, please tell me how you guys have run succubi and incubi in your games, and players, let me know how your PCs have encountered or dealt with them over the course of your adventures, and also let me know what you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.